webinar built a rock-solid HR business case for recruitment process outsourcing. You'll all be muted during the call, but feel free to ask any questions you have along the way in the chat box that is at the right bottom-hand corner of your screen. We'll also open it up to any questions at the end. Our two speakers today, I'm going to go to the next slide, are Rich Dunn, who's the Senior Director of RPO Operations for Yoh, and Matt Rivera, who is our Vice President of Marketing here. Matt, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, we have a great set of slides for you on building a business case, some great advice for you, and we're very lucky to have Rich Dunn with us today. He's the guy that's been on both sides of the desk, so he is going to share with you a lot of the insights he's gained from being a talent acquisition professional in working in an organization, and then as the director of our operations for one of our largest customers that has many, many hires every year, and he coordinates a huge number of recruiters. And so he's going to tell us about how you can build a business case that's rock solid, and then at the end we're going to share some ideas about how to make sure that you are getting the results you thought you could get. So that's what we're going to go over today. So Rich, glad to have you with us. How are you doing today?
Thanks a lot, Matt. Hey, I really appreciate the invite. Obviously, I'm very happy to be on the team here, and it's I think we've just got some really interesting points to discuss today. Really focused on how you're going to assess, how you're going to build the case, how you're going to measure the case, to see if RPO is a real option for you. It's an area that I'm particularly passionate about and really excited to discuss.
Awesome, and I could say that is the truth. In preparing for this, you know, Rich, we talked about it a lot, and he has an obvious passion for this, and you're going to get a ton out of this. And then just kind of keep in mind that Rich is a great resource if you'd like to connect or network with him, even following our webinar today. So as we get started, we wanted to share with you just a little bit about Yoh. We are sponsoring the webinar today, and we're one of the first technology staffing firms, and really we've made our mark in recruiting in the technology areas, and we continue to do that today, whether it's through our contract labor and contract management services, or recruitment process outsourcing, where we are on the HRO Today Baker's Dozen. We have been for a few years now, also on the MSP Baker's Dozen for managing hires coming through other channels. And we're part of a larger privately held corporation, the Day & Zimmerman group of companies, about a $2.7 billion privately held services corporation. So we're happy to do this today and happy to be a resource to you. I'm going to ask Rich just to go over some of the Yoh RPO, some of the specifics about what RPO services we provide, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation.
Sure, thanks, Matt. So if I look at where we sit from an RPO perspective, I think RPO can mean a couple of different things to different people. Where we focus is more of a customized solution. So obviously you can have an end-to-end recruitment solution, you know, tying all the processes together, or more of an a la carte, or what we would call a point and process, a little bit of plug and play into a particular infrastructure that you've already built. So what I want to make sure is that we level set early on that RPO does not have to be defined as this massive kind of mountain to move. It can be a smaller engagement. It can be plug and play. From a Yoh perspective, if you look at the team makeup that we have now, as Matt was mentioning, incredibly proud to be recognized on the Baker's Dozen by HRO Today. And the real point of pride there is that's driven by our customers. That's a survey that goes out from HRO Today, the client base, and it really makes us very proud to know that they feel that good about our background. The team that we have is a tenured team. You're looking at some of the stats on the left. 13 years average tenure. We are largely focused in the technical expertise, aviation, manufacturing, engineering. And then we've just kind of added a couple of bullet points for some of the key service offerings that are included. I think that if you look, the one, another component that we don't have there is our RPO solutions are not simply sitting in a back office on the phone. We have our consultants that sit on client site deeply embedded within our customers.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Rich. Let's move on and get into what we're here to talk about today. And one of the things we wanted to highlight is in making your case, so certainly as you're making your business case, we're going to talk about the specifics related to your business and your needs for recruiting. But one of the questions that's always asked is, why is it important right now, and why RPO in general as a service is something that you might consider. So we just thought we'd give you a little bit more ammunition on a larger kind of macro scale. So the RPO market is growing at 12 to 17%. If you look at the BLS jobs, there's really this tight market that we've all been hearing about. It's true, and depending on the major metro area that you may be in, it may be truer for some areas and harder to recruit in some areas. And especially if you're in an area that is outside of metro, it can be very challenging right now to attract individuals to come to your city, your area that is not one of the major metro areas. So that is something that's driving the need for having this kind of resource and support in recruiting. One interesting fact that we pulled out from the U.S. Census, just kind of a thing, and I would keep this in the back of your mind as Rich is talking about the experience that you're creating for your candidates and even anybody that works in your organization who is making use of your recruiting resources. Experience is extremely important to millennials, the experience that they have throughout the process. So that's a key driver for having a good, efficient program and process around recruiting. And then the last one that we've heard a lot about is just under half in this recent poll define themselves as passive candidates, which means that, probably everybody is really a passive candidate, so they're defining themselves, but a lot more would probably think about another job or talk to somebody about a job if they had the opportunity to. So,
hey, Matt, I just wanted to touch on that real quick and just say, hey, you know what? We will talk about user experience overall. I think it is to absolutely highlight your point about the millennial population. We're going to talk about user experience from a candidate perspective and from a hiring manager perspective. Absolutely a critical thing to look at, to be measuring, and to put on your radar.
Awesome, thank you. I would say that's a key thing to listen for as we go through here, and a great driver for why we're looking to do this. So as we dive into the presentation, we wanted to start with a quick question for you just to kind of gauge where you are, and this may help us also with how we are talking about where you are in your process and when in your thought process with this. So if you could just take a quick look at the poll and answer the question, so where are you and or your organization as it relates to exploring RPO? And you can see the options there. And you can just take a moment, we'll just take a moment to let everybody kind of chime in there really quickly if you could, and that'll give us an idea. And we'll give maybe another 30 seconds. A lot of people on the call today, so we'll make sure you all get an opportunity to respond. And then why don't we go ahead and close the poll. And Amy, I'm going to have you show the poll, if you could, and then just give us a quick, the results.
Looks like as far as the audience, we have about 14% are new buyers of RPO services. 57% are still trying to define their need. Looks like nobody's really shopping around. They've at least identified that RPO is something that they're looking into, and 29% of you are actually in the request for information stage where you're actually actively looking for an RPO company. So I know it looks like a majority of you are still trying to define it. So hopefully this call will help you define that need and be able to bring it up to your executives.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all for doing that. I think that will help us. All right, so go ahead and hide the poll results, and we'll get on to helping you make sure that you can build this business case. So Rich, why don't you give us the key takeaways right up front?
Sure. I thank you for the poll. I think it actually will be really helpful for the folks that are on this call. Some of this information can be absolutely pertinent in building that business case. The goal that I have, that our team here has today, is to really provide you with the tools that will assess your needs, engage in that initial change management, prove it out, and to really help look for some of those key points that you'll need to sell the idea into the organization. It's right, so it's the assessment, building the business case, and then selling it in. Right, we want to allow you to really communicate the idea from a place that will resonate among your key stakeholders.
All right, and let's get on to it, because I think that you're going to find that Rich is going to give you all the information you're going to need to start that process. So let's talk about, Rich, let's talk about building the process here. So one of the key things that we have identified, and we know this from our experience, is you have to define this kind of need, and different organizations obviously have different needs, and it can be driven by a lot of things that can happen. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of those things that will be driving the need for implementing an RPO solution, or any recruiting solution for that matter.
Sure, and you're absolutely right. It could mean a number of different things. Again, an RPO solution, and working with a partner, is a custom solution. It is based completely on your needs, and we'll walk through how to look at the metrics, the key metrics in the processes to ensure that it is custom to you. But some of the things that will initially drive it. Maybe you have a greenfield site that needs to be rapidly staffed. Changes within the business, sudden growth or contraction. See, that is, that there's some workforce planning predictability issues, right? Do you have the ability to scale up very quickly, or essentially turn off the faucet or scale down, right? And what are you going to do when you have potentially fixed costs within a talent acquisition team with a staffing plan that is a little bit unpredictable? So we kind of look at it, the way that I look at it is three key areas: is cost management, technology, and talent, right? These are pretty consistently three areas that will continually come up as you're discussing this idea, as you're selling this idea into the organization. If you look at kind of cost management, the one call out there that I really look at is going back to that workforce planning predictability. You'd be amazed at the fact that your organization is probably not unique, and that there's not many companies that are particularly excellent at workforce planning. Plus, economically, it's a bit of a challenge. How do you scale up your recruiting team to match the need? Looking at that technology component, you may have the infrastructure, you may have an applicant tracking system. I would ask, how are you currently using it? Are you allowing the technology to enable your process and make it more efficient? There's a number of things along with that, right? We can talk about them. That compliance component. Is your process compliant? Is that technology enabling the compliance? Do you have the right metrics? Basically, are you getting the value out of that technology that you had hoped to get? The key, most important component of it is the talent. and really looking at your organization. Do you effectively assess talent? Do you have a set interview plan? Have you rolled out a guidebook? Have you trained your managers? Are your processes defined? Have you written them down? Have you made mention of what needs to be 100% compliant, what you can bend on, do you push it out from the center and allow different sites to tailor it to their needs? A lot of this is going to speak to two different user experiences, the candidate experience and the hiring manager experience. Have you looked at those? Have you gone to different sites to take a look at what your reviews have been from a Glassdoor, from a Vault, to understand what the candidate is saying? And most importantly, your hiring managers, is it self-service? Is it full service? Are they happy with the service that they're getting now? And again, do you have a team that has a knowledge of your marketplace? So I would say, Matt, that's a good starting block to really looking at the need for an RPO.
Excellent. And one of the things we talked about is certainly with that talent is, think about the candidate experience that, you're providing to that talent coming into your organization or potentially coming into your organization, right?
It's 100% critical, right? It's the employment brand. Most companies, you could argue that you should always look at your candidates as your customers, candidates as your consumers. If they have a poor candidate experience, they're not going to buy or engage your company from a consumer or a customer perspective. It's one of the most simplistic ways to look at it.
All right, so let's talk about the assessments and how are you, what are the areas and things that you're going to look at to kind of start to figure out whether you need an RPO, how you might start structuring an RPO with an RPO partner or talking to them about it, and the things that you'll need to know and things that you'll need to think about to kind of make that assessment, and what are some of the things that are going to influence that, and how you're going to start to set yourself up for success as you're building that business case.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Matt. And if I look at it, that can just be an absolutely giant topic. You could go in so many different directions. That's why we've kind of set a little bit of a guide here and said, hey, this is a great place to at least start and just start kind of digging through it. Let's look at the open jobs that you have. How often does it fluctuate? Is it cyclical? Do you have a lot of the same type of jobs, or is it highly skilled, one-off, low-volume jobs? What is your current budget? What are the dollars that have been allotted? How are those dollars used? Do you have a very heavy agency or search firm spend? Probably something you want to reduce. Are you looking at the technology that you're using? Is it user-friendly for your hiring managers? Do you have self-service? And what do they feel? How do they feel about it? You may have, sure, in one way, shape, or form, you have a talent acquisition function or a recruiting team in place. If you're looking at the current HR staff levels and responsibilities, is it HR as recruiters, which can dilute somebody's responsibility, right? How do you potentially get those people in your HR team, your talent acquisition team, to focus on their highest value activities? I think one of the keys for me when I look at this is really, you hit the nail on the head. Where can you get early wins? Where are you most likely to succeed? That very much speaks to looking at your internal champions. Who are the key influencers that you need to seed this idea with, or that you want to get their feedback as you're assessing. Because if early on, if you're getting those key influencers' feedback, they could become your early champions and early adopters.
And I think that's a really great point for everyone as you're looking at this. You know, as you're looking for those early wins and those things, you're looking for those opportunities, right, to influence those folks that are likely to be key influencers and early adopters and champions for, you know, as you're socializing this. So I think that's, you know, a really key point that you make there. These, you know, a lot of the things we have on the checklist here will certainly help you gather the data and some of the things that logically make sense to everyone, but you certainly want to look for those areas where kind of emotionally, I'd say, for lack of a better term, within the organization that will help you. And we'll talk about that in a couple of slides, some of the impacts you can expect to see when you start talking about RPO or start talking about you know, what used to be termed outsourcing. And some people are comfortable with it, and some organizations are comfortable with it, and some aren't. So I think that's a really great point. So why don't we talk about the who in this equation, who we're talking to, and who could be potentially some of those key influencers, and typically they're referred to as the key stakeholders for this. So let's talk about key stakeholders, and I'll let you tell them what WIIFM means.
That was pretty simple. I think I got that one. It's
okay.
What's in it for me? It's so simplistic yet so true. And as you're assessing and selling this idea into the organization, different functions, different roles are going to have a different focus. On this call today, we have talent acquisition. There is procurement and sourcing. There's human resources. Everybody's going to have a little bit of a different focal point. I think that if you look at kind of that C level, the talent, the cost, most importantly, engagement, right? Is this something that is going to further engage the base and bring a level of innovation and to our team? If you're looking at procurement, right there, value and cost. So those are things you would want to speak to when you're looking at these different stakeholders. In HR, you know, how engaged can they get with the customer, with their internal customer? How will this impact their customer base? And how can they improve that experience, right? The business, I think a real key there is addressing the opportunity cost of an open role. Is there a revenue loss? Can you define that? The other key component there that HR and the business would be concerned about is going back to that engagement. If you have open roles, loss of productivity, other people handling those roles, there's potential engagement issues there. You know, I would look at the fact that business can be a really key influencer in this entire process, and you want them to really understand what you're trying to do and really key in on the what's in it for me. That is the group that is ultimately responsible, right? It's their hire. They need to feel invested in the process. So a great place to start seeding the idea.
Really key point. That's a great point. You really want to have them engaged in that process. So
Absolutely.
As you look through, we have all of the levels here and you know, the impact to them that they may be thinking of and their goals and expectations. But certainly, you know, as you kind of go up, you know, at some point this gets socialized and sold and to that kind of C level or someone who is probably an executive type champion for this. and to tell us, what's most important to them and why it's important to make sure that you address their needs and their experience, or what they're going to get out of this. If we're talking about what's in it for me, for the leaders.
Yeah, it's a great point, Matt, and I'm sorry, great question. Your RPO provider, certainly this is something that Yoh does. We really understand that great level of responsibility that's placed upon us for our client's employment brand. We become the ambassadors for that client to to that talent pool, that talent marketplace. We often hear, how's an outside organization going to better assess talent than us? Do they really understand our organization? The way that you sell through those, or the way that you would address those objections, is the simple fact that a good RPO provider will come in and further assess your organization to really understand the employee value proposition, understand how you sell your organization. Maybe they will help you to clarify and make that EVP a little bit more concise. Looking at the fact that we know that our success is very, very closely tied to your success. That if we succeed, you succeed. If we don't succeed, we know this is a big investment of time, a big investment of your influence, and can directly affect you if that RPO team isn't successful. Put it quite plainly, we have skin in the game. And to say that it's about trust is an understatement. It is truly a partnership.
And I think that, Rich, one of the things that we've been talking about around the experience is that employment brand idea, and making sure that, all of the things that we're kind of talking about here, whether it's employee engagement and diversity and trust and all those are all elements of a strong employment brand for a company. And you want that maintained. You want to enhance that. And I think that's really important, and a really important point you made on there. I'm going to pause for just a second and ask Amy if we have any questions that have come in. We've got a few more slides left, but we're doing great on time, and we'll get you out of here early, I think. Amy, do we have any questions that have come in?
You actually read my mind, Matt. I just went off mute. We had a couple questions come in. First question was, how much of the process does a company need to have built before engaging in an RPO? Can the RPO help build the process from scratch or recommend changes to an existing process?
Yes and yes. So I can address that one. Here's the nice part about a great RPO partner. They can come in, they have the experience of looking across the processes of many companies that they've worked with, and also know not just how to look at your process and how to optimize the current process. Understanding, that is it optimized from a technology perspective? Is it compliant? Does it feel good to the outside from a user experience? But what we can also do is look at your business objectives if you don't have a process set up. If this is something brand new, then let's talk to your business leaders. Let's understand your business objectives, and then let's build a process from there. And we would walk you through that. We'll walk you through choosing an applicant tracking system, walk you through building a process, walking through the compliance of that process if need be, walking through a structured talent acquisition strategy, how to go to market, how to build your employment brand, where to take that employment brand from a recruitment media perspective. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great. Just one more question that came in. what are some keys to a great RPO partnership? What should they look for in a RPO partner?
That's a good one. I think there's a mutual trust in understanding that you're both looking to achieve the same end. And when I say that is, it's a complete, and I'm going to go back. I know it's so, can I try? But trust, and it's a continuous process of inspiring that trust in one another. So that might be great. The RPO provider has been given a set of service level agreements to hit. We don't hit those service level agreements. We know where we're not hitting them, how we're going to fix it, and we call it out. We bring that to the table. We're very open and transparent. From a client perspective, what's very important to me in working with my client base is that they are equally as transparent. I need to know what you feel is wrong so I can ensure I can address that objection, maybe tighten up certain processes to be able to address that.
Excellent. That's great. And I think that, you're making a great point there that accountability builds trust. And,
on
if
both
you're
sides.
both accountable and transparent, that goes a long way. All right. Thanks, Amy. If we get any more, we'll pause. Let's keep going. I wanted to share this with you, and this just might be helpful. This is not mine. It's from Beckard and Geiker. It's you probably change equation that if you've been in HR or other done some change management, you might have seen this before. But really, it's just something to ponder as you're going through this. So the equation is this: if dissatisfaction times the vision times the steps, the first steps toward that vision, if those together are greater than the resistance, then change is possible. And really, it's just a simplistic way of saying that if you're lacking in any one of those three areas, so if you have some dissatisfaction, but you don't have a vision for how the future could be and you're making no progress toward that, you're probably not going to overcome the resistance. And if you don't have a vision, if you just have a lot of dissatisfied people and you're trying to take some steps but they don't know where it's going, again, also, so any one of those could be zero. And as we all know from math, I know you were told there'd be no math, but as we all know from multiplication, if any one of those is zero, that side of the equation is going to remain zero. So you're never going to overcome that resistance. So the things that we're arming you with today can hopefully help you with the V and the S of this, to create that vision for those key stakeholders that you have, and also to start taking those steps towards change, whether it's in a small part of your business or whether it's just doing those assessment type steps and things that show that there is some progress towards that to overcoming. So if you do have resistance, I'm going to talk about that right now, a little bit of the things you might encounter, and this will hopefully help you with this equation moving forward. And then the key question we have that we ask most of the organizations is, there are certain organizations where, outsourcing is just kind of the way they do things, and then there's other organizations where it can be very foreign to them. So that creates a whole different environment for that change to happen, and that R on the right side there might be a lot larger. So you might have to create a very strong case. You might have to show where that dissatisfaction is and create some of those factors on that left side in a very strong fashion to allow you to overcome that resistance.
So and Matt, I will address that. I just wanted to make a note that I'll say this won't be the first time I say this, but these are things that we can be helpful with in building that case. You'll see my contact information at the end of the webinar. I can assist in building the case. We have tenured consultants, myself, that can come and really help you do that assessment and help you address those needs.
And that's, you engage Rich, let me tell you, that would be a good thing. So let's talk about some of the expectations, because I think this is a really helpful slide, because some of these issues are reactions that we see here. The face on the photograph here notwithstanding, these are some of the reactions that you may get as you go throughout your organization trying to make that change. So we wanted to give you an idea. So why don't you tell us about just a couple of these, Rich, in how they can combat some of these reactions that they may get, or their perceptions of what's happening when an RPO provider comes in.
And I'll tell you, Matt, that could be my face on a Monday prior to a triple mocha latte. I get it. So there's a lot of reaction to this when you're looking, when you see the word outsourcing, sometimes that's what people key in on, right? The O of the RPO, and it can induce several different reactions. One of the key ones that we've heard is, lose my job. It starts to disengage people. People are afraid of it. And what we really have to look at is the fact that RPO isn't there to wholly replace. It's there to augment. Perhaps we're providing a component of the process that you don't have. Perhaps we're fortifying one that you do have. And we want to be really clear about that, the scope of where RPO will play, right? What are the parameters? The component of loss of control, I've heard that many times. Your RPO provider, and again, this is something that we do very well, is to partner and place side by side with our client base. A lot of times our client will set strategy, or will partner in setting strategy, and then we'll go and execute. And we'll execute to service level agreements that have been set clearly. Those service level agreements are set based on the critical components of your process, and really where you see the true value, that's what we'll measure. You don't lose control, you actually may gain more control. Some of the other things I just wanted to touch on, where we have the applicant tracking system. I go back and I'll say it again, are you using it effectively? Is it enabling the process, or is the process surrounded by, is the process just driven by the technology, right? You know and I know that, sometimes recruiters can be the people that least want to add notes into the system or track anything in a system. How do you make it user-friendly? How do you ensure you're getting the data you need out of the system? How are you using it for sourcing? All different components that a solid RPO provider will come in and provide you with. How will it change your process? Two key call-outs there is compliance. From an OFCCP perspective, perhaps you're not a government contractor, but I've seen that a lot of people that don't have government contracts still want to run their organizations as if they do. Right? So a lot of considerations that go into that, and your provider will have a background in that. And you'll feel comfortable that they are limiting your exposure in that. And then looking at the user experience. That's, couldn't be more critical. One of those top priorities, I want to make it easier. I want to make it more engaging to the hiring manager. I want to build our employment brand by a great candidate experience. So it can, to say it can be a game changer for an organization is an understatement.
Absolutely. And again, this is going back, as we talked about before, to that user experience, and it's a big part of branding. It's a big part of maintaining good staff, and it really, it's one of those things. I'll make a quick point because I was looking at, because this is HR Executive Magazine, and they came out with a poll and a couple of things questions that they typically ask HR, and the 3 biggest challenges faced by HR. Top of the list is ensuring employees remain engaged and productive, and then the second one, only about 3 percentage points below that, was attracting and retaining diverse talent. So what I think the point that Rich has been making about the experience here is that a good RPO program or a good recruiting process, whatever piece of it might be managed by the RPO provider, is critical to not only getting people into your organization and creating a good experience for them as they come into your organization, but think of all the folks that actually work within the organization, and that hiring manager and the people in the business that are trying to get projects done, trying to get talent onto their teams, and the experience that they have with getting good individuals to work for them. So I think it really can help. A good solid recruiting process can help both with actually getting people in and that kind of process of that, but even retaining good people. They have a good experience when they come in, and they hopefully stay, and then while they're there, if they need to hire people, they have a good experience in doing that as well. All of those things are pieces and parts of an employment brand and that experience that I think can lead to that. So I think it's really, really important.
And I'm going to hop in on that last one too, and it's probably a good way to bridge it. RPO doesn't feel generic. I'm sorry, let me go back. RPO shouldn't feel like a generic plugin. We are embedded within your organization. Before things begin, we know your organization. We become an extension of your team. I think that's critical for people, because it can't feel, you know, like this very just kind of plain generic solution. No, it's very tailored, very specialized, custom, and embedded in your organization. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Matt, to that last slide.
So one of the things that we wanted to make sure before we left this topic here is that, you know, as you're selling this internally, you know, there are kind of key overriding things that are related to certainly filling jobs and getting all of these processes done. But these are also key things to look at to help you build that business case. And so talk about a couple of these things here that might have a really strong influence on why you would want to implement some type of recruiting process or recruiting outsourcing.
Yeah, this is really simple. These questions will help you build the case for it. Right? These are very, these are kind of the basic first level questions. And a lot of this you can get through your, through looking at your existing HR strategies, right? Where do you want HR to focus on? Where are they focused on now? Or where do you want them to be? But where are they actually spending their time? If part of that is talent acquisition, then you have to really consider a partner for that. Answering these will allow you for that clarity to understand if RPO is a viable solution. I'll put it out there. My contact information will be at the end. I can walk through these questions with you. If you're just kind of wondering, or if you just want to kind of bounce ideas, please don't hesitate to reach out. But this is a great start.
All right, so great. Let's. I want to leave time at the end for some questions because we have some really great questions coming in, and we will get to those questions. So I'm going to go to let's talk just a little bit about before we get to those questions, some of the proof, and just talk a little bit about how you create some of the metrics and what are some of the key metrics, and then how do you kind of make sure that you're getting, or that the client is getting, the benefit out of this that we've been talking about. All sounds great, right? But how do we get the benefits, and how does it relate to some of those expectations we talked about earlier? And when you built the business case, you said, hey, this is, you know, important, and how are we getting that? How are we measuring that and showing that we have that proof?
Yeah, and I can do this quite simply as well. you know, kind of quickly in the interest of time. Look at the process when you've done your assessment. Look at the key points in your process that are critical, that you can't drop, or that maybe your company is known for, or that your leaders and stakeholders feel are the most critical points in that process. And then that is exactly where we set an SLA. That's where we measure it, right? You'll be able to, you know, when you start looking at those SLAs, are those indicators trending favorably? If they're not trending favorably, there you go. What's going on? What do we need to fix? What do we need to adjust? It's all part of the process. I'd say that early on is the key feedback from stakeholders. Nothing can sink you quicker than those hallway conversations. How are we soliciting that feedback? I think that's critical. It's not only how you're soliciting it, but how you're addressing it.
How are you addressing it? So I'll take one of these questions now that that came in that I think is relevant to that. So we talked a little bit about having skin in the game, and we're talking about the KPIs now and some of those things. What happens if you're failing? What happens if you're not delivering? What is the skin in the game for the RPO provider? How is that measured, and what if you're not delivering?
Yeah, look, it happens, and I think it goes back to the conversation that we were having earlier, which is accountability. I think you have to look at all the details behind why you're failing. Look at the process. Look at the people that are influencing the process. Look at the marketplace. Most importantly, build your plan to get out of it. Make it very specific, right? Remember your SMART goals, and it's got to be specific. It's got to be measurable. You got to put a timeline on it, and ensure that you're working side by side with your client to work through that.
Excellent. And I think here's another one that I think is related to some of the things, expectations that we have that we talked about. Is engaging RPO, is it always a cost saving? Are you always going to save money?
That's a great question. You know, I think that is the overall, that's a focal point. Do I think you're always consistently going to be saving? You may not all the time, but you have other types of gains that are equally as important. You have process consistency. You have the recruiting knowledge. You have the build-up of your employment brand and the recruitment media, the setup of very tight metrics. Most importantly, accessing a large talent pool, a talent pool that is tailored and focused and specific in your company. So I'd say, Matt, that is something you absolutely endeavor to achieve, is the cost savings. But I would also argue there are other measures that are equally as important.
All right, great. We've got another couple questions. We won't get, hopefully we'll get to all of them. We'll see, we've got quite a few coming in, so we appreciate that. So why don't you kind of wrap up with this before we get to a couple more questions, so we're kind of respectful of everyone's time, and just take us through kind of the 4 main keys that we just went over.
Yeah, and it's really simple. Number one, and you know, the whole question earlier, a lot of you have already put thought into looking at RPO as a viable option. Having an outsourced recruiting partner, right, that will come in and embed themselves in your organization in one way, shape, or form. It doesn't, you know, again, end-to-end or point and process, but you want to identify the need. Assess if there is a need, right? So you got to get through that component. Know what to expect. You're going to have many people that may not know what RPO is. So make sure that you have the definition, that you understand what it can do for the organization, and that you can sell that. Seed your idea to your key influencers within that, so they can start evangelizing the idea at least, right? Never push the idea of somebody that's not ready for it, but at least you can seed it with people so they're already thinking. And then most importantly, be able to prove it out. Be able to prove that the decision that you made, the path that you went down, either had a cost savings, a time savings, a talent increase. Hold your partner provider to that service level agreement. And then come back on a very regular basis and talk to those measurements. If they aren't, like you had said, Matt, where they need to be, and or if you're behind, great, be accountable, address it, and move forward. That's going to happen every time. So I think that if you look at those, identifying the needs assessment, knowing what you're up against, and then tracking and proving, those are 4 basic premises to actually completing this case study. Or I'm sorry, building the business case.
Right. Okay, so we have just a couple more questions here we'll try to address, and then we'll wrap up. And we do have a freebie for, we're going to give you some additional information today. So one of the questions that came through, and I think it relates to kind of this idea of, if you're the idea of losing current resources or changing out current resources. So how do you mitigate, I'm just going to give you the question, how do you mitigate the loss of current knowledge by the internal recruiters? So are you going to lose that knowledge? Are you, what's going to happen if you have a seasoned team that has knowledge of the organization? How do you combat that or talk about that as an objection that somebody might say to you?
I mean, my first reaction is why do we have to lose them? Can we? They can still be very much part of the team. And again, I want to make sure that the person that asked that question would understand. This isn't this isn't a replacement type of function, or I'm sorry, solution. This is an augmentation to your current team. We need to make sure, though, that while we're completing our implementation steps and implementing the RPO, that we're gathering that institutional knowledge, right, from those recruiters that have been there, the stories, the background, the culture, how to navigate the politics effectively. We want to get all of that up front in an implementation. So in case that individual feels that they want to move on after an RPO has come in, that we have those stories. But it certainly wouldn't want to unseat anybody that's already there. I want to come in as a partner, as a larger component of the group.
That's great. And I know that one of the examples that we've talked about a little bit is focus for some of the existing resources. So I know that there's definitely opportunities sometimes for the RPO provider to take over maybe the sourcing part of the process and hand that off to experienced recruiters within the organization to be able to focus on that rather than being out and being hunters and doing all of that type of work, or to experienced HR professionals within the organization where they handle some other part of that process. So I think there's, as you've described, various opportunities to collaborate with the group that may be in place there, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing a replacement of individuals or resources. And that's something, again, that you work through as part of the steps that we've kind of outlined here on what resources you have, where do they have expertise, where do you have gaps, what is your process like, what's the utilization of the ATS, what are your goals for those individuals and HR in general. There's a lot that kind of falls into the HR bucket, including talent acquisition. So I think that's a great question.
One of the best places to play is when we are embedded and sitting side by side the client's recruiters.
That's I think, a great point. So why don't we, so there's a couple other questions. I'm sorry we won't get to all of them today, but we will try to follow up with you, anybody that did ask a question that we didn't get to. And if you have specific questions, we'll always be available to you. So, but what I wanted to leave you with is, if you need more information, we're here to help you. We have various publications and content available. One of the most popular that we have right now is RPO, Definition, Cost Models, and Goals. So it's kind of a everything you wanted to know about RPO, but we're afraid to ask kind of thing. And it provides you with some basic background on how some of these models are set up and those types of things. And then we have other information. So at yoh.com, you can take advantage of those at any time. We're happy to share those with you, and we're glad that you decided to share some time with us today, and hopefully that was important. As a special thank you for those of you that were on the call today and signed up, we're going to send you, within the next couple of days, we're going to send you this list of kind of a checklist here of questions and things that will help you identify in that first step of identifying the need as we outlined it. So we're going to give you some specific questions and things to ask that are in this list right here that can help you identify that need and help you start down that path, so towards deciding if an RPO engagement might be right for you. And as a special added bonus, I can tell you, for Rich, we are publicizing his phone number. You can give Rich a call if you have a question, need some help now. He is available at richard.dunn@yoh.com, and he is a great resource. Feel free to reach out to him, even if you don't have needs. Rich would love to hear from you. He loves talking about this stuff. So I think that's it. We are right up about. And Amy, is there anything else before we end?
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Expect a follow-up email from us with the deck and a link to the recording, and also that freebie that Matt was just telling you about. Once again, thanks for attending.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for all of your great advice today.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time.
All right, everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you.